Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 600. The SPaMCAST 600, 600, features my interview with Sandy Mamoli. We talked about teams and the book she co-authored, Creating Great Teams, How Self-Selection Lets People Excel, Sandy's unique perspective as a world-class athlete and Agile Coach allows her to deliver team-level options you didn't know you had. Are you ready to self-select? It's time for the interview. Sandy Mamoli, welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast.
Thank you. Hello, Tom. I'm super happy to be here.
I am pumped. This has been a long time. We've been conversing back and forth on email for a while, and then finally did a pre-interview and finally got this all going in the right direction. Sandy, teams, core topic. Teams should be fixed always. Perhaps we should blow them up. What's wrong with that statement?
Oh, it's wrong on so many levels. First of all, I really love working in teams. My background is professional sports. I used to do I played professional handball in Europe. It's quite a big sports over there. And one of the things I have learned there and that really has stuck with me is that in team sports, like in work, you can't actually achieve anything just on your own. And you can do amazing stuff and still lose the game, or you can sometimes even play average and win. And I've taken that into my work life and realized what we're doing wrong, or what I've seen going wrong so many times, if people just focus on themselves, on individual performance, and then try to piece the pieces together. And so in my experience, teams work so much better. And should they be stable forever? God, no. What might you say that?
Just to push the conversation forward, I don't think any team stays the same forever, albeit I'm sure that it'd be very easy to find people who espouse, very long-lived teams without a whole lot of dynamicism to them. In terms of an attribute of a good team, what makes a good team? Is it someone selects the team? Should team members weigh in on that? How would all those people get together to be a team?
I think what I've seen at work life and what I've experienced, I think people joining a team, people deciding for themselves which team they want to be in, which team they can contribute the most, they like being in, I think is the best way of working in a team and selecting teams. So you might have seen that I'm totally into this topic, that I love self-selecting teams, both from a perspective of the individual, but also from a perspective of the organization, because I think that you get better teams if you just throw that problem to the people who are actually involved and trust them to make a good choice. And yes, it needs to be facilitated, but it's not that hard.
Facilitated?
Facilitated in a way that we don't just throw 200 people into a room and hope for the best, but we broker conversations around, the six of you have decided to be a team. Do you honestly believe you can deliver to your purpose? Or do you really think it's a good idea that you are 5 testers and 1 developer? Talk me through how that's going to work. If you really want to do that, that's fine, but let's have a conversation about that. And having iterations around, we think overall, those are the best teams for the company. You don't get it right the very first time, but then surface those kind of problems, that too much of one thing, too little of another thing, not all the teams are fully formed, and let's try it again with the new information.
How much experimentation can most organizations absorb before, leaders who are used to selecting teams and assigning, how long before they get antsy?
Not long. What I'm talking about with the iterations is to have max a day. If you have 250 people, it doesn't take longer than max a day. If you have people, then it will be less time to just go through different combinations and decide on something. And what comes out of this is something that's pretty good. It's not perfect, and there are some teams that don't work amazingly well. Others do. But that's no different from a management selection. And in general, usually better, even though it's not perfect either, but nothing is perfect either.
Team self-select, and that's an approach, and you're obviously practiced at that. How do we get teams where we allow teams to do self-selection? How do we keep teams from becoming myopic and not have any degree of differences among them so that we have more than one point of view?
People are actually quite smart. Those teams that end up having the same type of person, same perspective, we all know they don't work very well. And that's something that most people have experienced. So I have never seen people making such bad choices. All the teams I've ever seen is people who like to work together, and people like to work with people who are not exactly the same as they are.
So what took you down this path of exploring self-selection, writing a book on it? You wrote Creating Great Teams, How Self-Selection Lets People Excel. You've gone down that path. How did you get there, and when did it become apparent to you that that was an approach that actually derives value or delivers value, let's say?
Well, we had a problem to solve, and we also had a great experience that was unrelated. I was working in 2012, around 2012 with a large e-commerce company in New Zealand. And one of those days we had a hackathon, and I had never done a hackathon before that. And it was a really, really cool day. And I saw all those people like coming in to work with passion, choosing what they wanted to work on, choosing who they wanted to work with, and having a great time and being super productive. And then I remember I went home and started blogging about how amazing that experience was. And then at the end, I thought, it's a shame we can't do this every day. And I thought, wow, what's wrong with me? I'm institutionalized. Like, who says we can't do this every day? And I thought, well, I'm not talking about 24-hour sprints, but what if we can take this idea that people work on what they want to work on with whoever else they want to work with? What if we take that into real life? And it coincided with us having a real problem. Like, we were in the middle of an agile adoption, going from basically a pile of people and a resourcing nightmare into having teams. So we said, well, we need to do this. We also keep going back and forth in those meetings where we're trying to move people around and trying to do what's best for them. But whenever we then told someone he was in that squad or that team, they would go, oh, yeah, well, not really that happy and not really what I wanted to do. So we're actually kind of failing at the traditional approach because we didn't seem to get it right. And because we had this problem, we didn't really get it right and we're scratching our heads about what to do. It was this great coincidence that we had a hackathon. It's like, hey, what about we try this and combine those two things? And we did, and it worked amazingly well with around 250 people at the time. And then started blogging about other people became interested in and after we had done this several times, we realized, actually, this is a good thing. This is something that can grow bigger and other people should benefit. So that's when David and I decided to write a book.
So you go down the path of doing this, and this has become pretty much the norm for your approach to addressing work at this point?
Yes.
When doesn't it work?
When it's fake. So the only time I've seen it fail is when people are given the opportunity to self-select and then management makes changes. So actually, this team is not going to work like that. And instead of this fake self-selection, I'd rather have an honest management selection.
Yeah. So is that what fake looks like? Are there other fake?
I haven't seen any other fakes. That's the one I have seen.
Mm-hmm.
I also totally understand the management view of it's got a lot of trust that's required. It's the what if you get it wrong, and I have often experimented with maybe giving management a veto where they can either reject the entire thing or not, but not move individual people around.
Okay, so it's an all or nothing rejection. Interesting. Have you ever seen them pull that cord and reject the whole thing?
No,
Yeah,
never. But
that would be really hard, I think.
yep. And they could. It's an option. It's more like it's a security blanket. Like if it really goes wrong, we can just go back to the old ways. It's okay. We can do a management selection. You haven't lost anything. Cool. You can pull the plug, but you can't meddle with it. It's yes or no.
In many organizations, at least here in the States, we have what I would call mixed staffing models. And I'm choosing my language carefully because I think there are some of them are crazy. You'll have people from one organization, probably with a different profit motive. You'll have people from the organization itself, and you might even have some people that are brought in as individuals and all shoved in a room. So there are a lot of different ultimate goals and probably different power differentials. How would you allow a group of people, because that's not a team at that point, how would you let a group of people like that self-select? Or would it even be possible?
It's a super interesting question. And I have succeeded with it, and I've also failed with it.
All right.
And I have once worked with a bank, and they had a rate of about 40% contractors. And their reasoning was, we don't want contractors to have the same status as our employees. We are doing something that is really good for our employees, and our contractors are second class. And what they did, and the plan was to have all the employees self-select, and then the contractors come in and basically speed date to fill the holes. Didn't work because it was a two-class society. Didn't work because the speed dating didn't work because people wanted to be nice to the contractors and take them all. So what the bank had hoped to only have some contractors left and only the ones that were needed didn't work at all. What they then changed to was, actually, why are we treating people so differently? Why don't we just say that while they're here, they are the same? It's a bit like a football player who's being rented out to a different team. While he's on that team, he's playing 100% for that team. So I have seen it succeed, and it's also my personal preference. I don't care who pays you. I don't care who you really work for. While you're here, you're part of the organization and you get to self-select into a team. And I think that is a much more promising way of integrating people into a workforce.
How does this translate if you're addressing things like business agility? They're outside of just the pure software world. Does this concept translate to a product level?
I've seen it, yeah. Yes. I mean, there are boundaries, and it's basic. It is a way of forming teams. So whoever should be part of a team, or also whoever interacts with that team, can and should be self-selected. And then there are things that are entirely outside of working in a team, and we should leave them alone, I guess. So, what are you thinking of?
If we were looking at an organization that had multiple products, and they wanted to embrace more of a business agility, or maybe a lean flow approach, where instead of all these rapid handoffs, they actually had teams that worked through the value chain. I'm just trying to picture, business and technical people, let's say, or maybe even distribution or sales people integrating into the self-selected teams. I guess it's another twist on thinking through how to penetrate the silos or boundaries between groups.
Yes. That is a really interesting thought. What I have done and seen is in product development where it does work and works well with technical people and business people. And then there are boundaries, the team boundaries, where people are outside the team but interact with the team, as you mentioned, sales or maybe operations. And often what I've seen work is then the other team or other group of people, say it's the operations people, platform operations people, they selected who they wanted to have a relationship with. Basically, I'm your ops person for those 3 squads or teams. I think they could potentially work with sales too. I have not done it with sales. That'd be an interesting experiment.
Well, see, the thing that I'm always troubled with self-selection, and in this I'm going to expose sort of a raw nerve. Once upon a time, unlike you, I did not play professional sports. And I was one of those kids that when it came time to play dodgeball back in grade school, I was one of the ones that were last picked and only picked because we had to pick everyone. Are there scenarios where teams can say, hey, we're just not going to pick you. You might work here, but you can't work with us, kind of a scenario?
It's funny how that is, and valid how that is very often people's first thought. It's the people must have a horrible time at school. It's everyone's thought what about that poor kid that doesn't get picked? Mm-hmm. And I was referring to facilitated process. And that is, so it doesn't happen. Nobody's getting picked or not picked. There's no picking. People put themselves into the team they want to work in. So it's an active choice to go somewhere. There's no picking. If you really have no idea where to go, because maybe you're on day 2 of your work life and you have just joined the company, and you don't know where to go, we usually have a sheet that goes, hey, I'm not in a squad. I'd like to be approached. But there is no picking in this.
Now, when we originally talked, one of the things that you said that has stuck with me, and I've actually thought about it while I was out jogging multiple times, was that a person should join the best team that will take them. What did you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that if you work with people or do anything with people that are better than you, you will learn a lot. And it's a shortcut to learning skills and to personal improvement, to get the opportunity to work with people who are a lot better than you are. You get to a level where you have better coaches, better managers, more attention, you have more challenging work. So I think it's a really good way of improving. What is important is that little part of the best team that will still accept you. And it's the accept you, that's the part that I think is important. If I decided to be on the national team in any sport nowadays, they would reject me because I provide no value. But if I can get always just a little level above me, just a little bit so I'm still stretched, a team that will accept me, I will go for that learning experience. And it's a bit related to, if you're always the smartest person in the room, you're probably going to leave and surround you with people where you're not the smartest person. Does that make sense?
That makes absolute sense. It also puts the onus on people to really think about always growing. Do you think?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
The whole idea of teams is important. How much of how you've thought about and changed how you thought about teams over the years is a reflection of where you've come from in terms of both, being, world-class consultant, writing books, professional athlete, Olympic athlete. So how did that all shape your practice today?
It's a very good question, and the answer is a lot. And it is something I have not been aware of for many years. And the reason why I now can say a lot is that for many, many years, I thought I was completely normal, like everyone else. And why doesn't everyone else just intuitively know that it's best to work in teams? This is how to work in teams. This is how we interact in teams. Things that were entirely logical to me. Then realizing that if you don't have this type of background, then you would not have a chance of knowing this. You would not, if you have never had the experience of working in a great team. Maybe because you've never done team sports. Maybe because you have never have been fortunate to work in a great team at work. Then you don't have that experience. And I realized that that is true for many people. So I think it has had a huge influence on me. And then what I wanted to do is share that part of something that I know, have experienced and know something about with other people, because I'm quite enthusiastic about it. And I think other people can benefit from that. And before I sound too arrogant with I have all this experience and I thought it was normal, there are other things that I've missed out on and that other people thought were completely normal, and I had no idea.
Well, and that's, I think, the power of team, right? In that is every person is an individual. They bring a diverse thought process, a diverse set of experiences to the table. You know, the worry, and we've touched on it, so I don't want to go too deep into it, is that there are scenarios where, cognitive biases force people to wall themselves off, whole teams to wall themselves off and homogenize. At what point does a team need to refresh itself?
I think in general, we already have a cognitive diversity problem, which is created by the people who we hire. So I think we could improve there a lot. But then there's also research that I really like, and I think it's a German guy named Rainer Katz who found out that if there's no change in a team for about 2 years, then it starts to stagnate. And I think that is quite congruent with my own experience. It doesn't mean you change the entire team all the time, but having one or two people in and out and having new impulses from the outside is really important. And I'm just when I talk about keeping teams stable, I think that comes very much from a position of, when I say keep them stable, that means there is enough throughput, because it is really hard nowadays to keep teams stable. There's always someone who moves to Australia or gets pregnant or wants to do something else. So I find it naturally occurs.
It's funny because people read or come up with the idea that teams have to be, well, they use the word stable, and stable to them means they never change. And they use that to say, well, we can't embrace these ideas, because if we do, then we can't predict when we're done. And they fall down some old sort of deep patterns that really have not removed themselves from the workplace, maybe never. Recently, I was talking with Jeff Dalton, and Jeff pointed out in his book, Great Big Agile, that team and senior management are still at significant differences. That having an agile mindset, the openness, all of the things that make teams work are at odds with corporate ladder climbing, and that's just not evolving. Is that something you've seen over the years, or is Jeff just being a little overly sensitive?
Poor Jeff. No, I think Jeff's a genius, so I totally agree. And I've seen that, and it is totally at odds with career paths, and it gets even more so the kind of higher up this imaginary ladder we come. I have recently seen people whose life plan has been to be a GM in a bank, and all of a sudden we're taking, and I understand we're taking this away. It's like, this is not important anymore. There are now 4 levels of hierarchy instead of the previous 7, for example. So that means a lot of people have plans and have had the behavior, if I just do as I'm being told, basically, there is a plan, everything will go to this plan. And we're coming and telling people, actually, this is not the best way to collaborate. We want you to collaborate in a different way. And we are basically changing or trying to change your life plans. And some people have no problem with that whatsoever. Other people are very attached to that plan. And I understand that they lose something. And overall, yes, I have the same observation that this is happening.
Teams, self-selection, ton of sense. Who owns the environment that makes that happen?
That is still management. I'm struggling with the word management, if I can find a better one. I don't care whether it's management or leadership yet. But I think that is management. They own the environment. They make it possible for people to self-select. I've seen that work very well. And I think contrary to, I'm slightly annoyed with what is going on in the wider Agile scene about this management bashing. I have recently overheard a conversation where one Agile coach asked other Agile coaches, so what do you think management wants? And everyone else replied, well, more power, of course. And I don't think that's the case. I think the environment is still controlled. The bigger environment is controlled by management. I think that's okay, but not on a level of detail we have previously seen. So just the big picture of like, what is the company actually producing? What is the purpose for the company? What is the purpose for a team? And then people can fill in the blanks and the details themselves.
So Deming wasn't wrong.
Guess not. He's a wise guy.
Sandy, this has been absolutely fantastic. Before we break, if you woke up tomorrow morning, somebody handed you a magic wand, you were then allowed to change any 2 things that affected how teams work, what 2 things would you change and why?
Every team I knew would have a purpose that is really important and something people love and just want to fulfill. And I would have every team have the autonomy to decide how they want to fulfill that purpose.
Super.
Can I have 5 more things?
Might as well. It's only bits and bytes.
I'm good with 2. If I get those 2, then I'm good.
Okay. All right. Now, it's interesting. We talk about self-selection on teams before, and it just occurred to me that a lot of people, unfortunately, if they can't self-select, they can't control the team that they're working with, the work that they're getting, they still have the big self-select. They leave. They go somewhere else. Yep. So that's a form of self-selection where if the organization, if the environment doesn't provide it, it provides itself.
Yes.
Sandy, this has been, as I said, this has been absolutely marvelous, and I'm happy that we were able to finally connect, and there are probably a half a dozen other things that we could chat about. Today, I want to say thank you again for doing this. At the end here, I open up the platform for my guests to promote anything they like. So at this point, obviously, people should still go out and buy the book. When the book originally was out, when?
2015, maybe 15, I think. Early, yeah.
But other than that, what would you like to promote?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the podcast. I think it has been a really interesting conversation, and I think we have much more to talk about. So if you show up at any of the Agile conferences, then let's hang out and talk more.
Yes.
And what I'd like to promote is not a particular book or blog post or anything like, but I'd like to promote self-selection itself. The idea and attitude that people should have the opportunity and work best if they can choose what they work on and who they work with. And in general, they get it right. And just that idea is what I'd like to promote.
Sandy, how would people continue the conversation?
They can connect to me on LinkedIn, or you can go to nomad8.com, where I have a lot of articles around self-selection, case studies, and help. You can also say hello on Twitter, where I'm at SPaMCAST, and lots of Agile conferences. Just walk up and say hi. Buy me coffee.
There you go. I will have that contact information in the show notes. Sandy Mamoli, thank you again for sharing your wisdom and tackling some tough issues. I asked some hard questions tonight, so it was fun, and I've got a page and half a note, so I'm happy.
Excellent. Me too. Thank you, Tom.
In Reread Saturday News, this is our last installment of our reread of Crucial Conversations, Tools for Talking When Stakes Are High, 2nd edition. I want to thank Nancy Castle for the great suggestion and everyone that voted during the selection process. This is a useful book. Interestingly, during the Heart of Agile get-together this week, a number of people recommended the book in the chat. I'm glad I read it. Reading the book for the first time during the reread process did add a little bit of additional effort. I found I had to skim the material more than I would have liked and probably missed some of the nuances. Remember, if you do not have your copy of Crucial Conversations, use the link in the show notes, buy a copy, help support the blog and the podcast, and most certainly by buying a copy, it helps support the authors. The next book in the series will be Steve Tendon and Daniel Duran's Tame Your Workflow. I will lay out the logistics for the reread next week. I'm looking forward to this. In the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 600, we will feature our interview with Brian Weaver. Brian is the founder and CEO of Torch AI. Also on LinkedIn, calls himself the Ringleader. We covered a wide range of topics, including AI and Agile, and the role of leadership in creating an environment where extraordinary results are possible. If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?